The neon sign outside the Bluebird Diner flickered against the darkness, casting red and blue shadows across the empty parking lot. Rain hammered the windows in steady rhythm while the clock behind the counter showed 11:30. Claire. Monroe wiped down the same section of counter for the third time, her movements automatic after 6 years of night shifts. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her uniform carried the faint smell of coffee and pie crust. She preferred the late shift. Fewer customers meant fewer fake smiles, fewer people asking questions she had no answers for. The silence felt honest in a way that daylight conversations never did. Most nights, she served truckers passing through, insomniacs seeking company, and the occasional lost soul who wandered in from the rain. When the bell above the door chimed, Claire looked up from her phone where she had been scrolling through art blogs she no longer contributed to. A man stepped inside, rain dripping from his dark coat onto the worn linoleum floor. He was tall with sharp features softened by exhaustion, his hair damp and pushed back from his face. His clothes were expensive but rumpled, as though he had been wearing them too long. Claire straightened, switching into her professional mode. The diner was empty except for old Mr. Patterson asleep in the corner booth, his coffee long cold. "Welcome to Bluebird," she said, her voice carrying the practiced warmth that came with years of service work. "Sit anywhere you like." The man paused, taking in the retro red booths and the checkered floor, the vintage posters on the walls and the pie case by the register. Something in his expression shifted, like he was seeing a memory instead of a place. "Thank you," he said quietly, choosing a booth by the window where he could watch the rain. Claire gave him a moment before approaching with a menu and a glass of water. Up close, she noticed the lines around his eyes, the kind that came from stress rather than laughter. His watch was simple but clearly expensive, and his hands looked like they belonged to someone who worked with ideas rather than tools. "Coffee?" she asked. "Please." Black. His voice had a rough edge, like he had been talking too much or not enough. She returned with a steaming mug, the aroma filling the small space between them. "Kitchen's technically closed, but I can make you a sandwich or heat up some pie if you're hungry." "Just the coffee is fine." He wrapped both hands around the mug but did not drink. "This place always open this late?" "Until midnight on weeknights." "We get enough late crowd to make it worth staying open." Claire lingered, something about his stillness keeping her there. "You passing through or local?" "Neither." "Both." He looked up at her, and she caught the full weight of his gaze. His eyes were gray, the color of storm clouds, and they held a kind of tired honesty she rarely saw. "I'm hiding, I think." The admission surprised her. Most people lied or made jokes. "They did not confess to strangers in diners. This is a good place for that," she said after a moment. "Nobody asks questions here." "Is that why you work nights?" Claire felt something shift in her chest. "Maybe. Or maybe I just like the quiet." "Quiet is underrated." He finally took a sip of coffee, grimaced slightly at the bitterness, but drank again. "Everything else is so loud now. Notifications, meetings, people who talk but never say anything real." She leaned against the counter, separating their space. "You sound like someone who needs a vacation from their own life." "That's exactly what I need." He set the mug down. "What's your name?" "Claire." "Julian." He did not offer a last name, and she did not ask. "Do you like working here, Claire?" The question was more complicated than it sounded. "It pays the bills. Lets me think. Gives me time to myself. But it's not what you dreamed of doing." She stiffened slightly. "How would you know what I dreamed of?" "Because nobody dreams of serving coffee at midnight unless they've given up on something else." His tone was not cruel, just observant. I recognized the look. Claire studied him for a long moment. The rain continued its percussion against the glass. Mr. Patterson snored softly in his corner. The coffee maker gurgled behind her. "I used to paint," she said finally. surprised at her own honesty. Thought I could make a living from it. Turns out the world has enough artists and not enough buyers. So you stopped. I got practical. She refilled his coffee without being asked. What about you? What did you give up on? Julian looked out the window at his reflection ghosted against the darkness. Being a good person. Or maybe just being happy. I'm not sure which came first. The weight of his words settled between them, like a third presence. Claire had heard confessions before, late-night ramblings from drunk customers or lonely travelers, but this felt different. Julian spoke like someone who had been holding the words inside too long, and they had finally broken free. You don't look like a bad person, she said. That's the problem with looking. It only shows the surface. He turned back to her. I built something that was supposed to help people, connect them, make communication easier. Instead, it made them lonelier, made them meaner, and I got rich watching it happen. Claire did not know what to say to that. She had read articles about tech entrepreneurs, their rise and fall, their promises and failures, but she had never met one sitting in her diner at midnight looking like he wanted to disappear. Is that why you're here? She asked. Running from what you built? Maybe. Or maybe I'm looking for something that feels real again. He met her eyes. This place feels real. You feel real. Her breath caught. Nobody had said that to her in years. After her accident, after the scar that ran along her jawline from a car crash that had not been her fault, people looked at her differently. They saw damage instead of person, but Julian looked at her like he was seeing someone, not something. I should let you drink in peace, she said, stepping back. Don't. The word came out quickly, almost desperate. I mean, if you don't mind, talking helps. The silence at home is different. It's empty. This silence has company. Claire glanced at the clock. 20 minutes until closing. Mr. Patterson would wake himself up and shuffle out like he always did. No other customers would come in this weather. Okay, she said, surprising herself. She poured herself a coffee and sat across from him in the booth, breaking her own rule about fraternizing with customers. But fair warning, I'm not good at small talk. Good. Julian's smile was small but genuine. I've had enough small talk, for 10 lifetimes. They talked until midnight, about everything and nothing, about the rain and the city and the way time moved differently at night, about disappointments and small victories and the weight of choices made too young. Julian did not mention his company or his wealth again, and Claire did not mention the portfolio of paintings gathering dust under her bed. When she finally flipped the sign to closed, Julian stood and pulled out his wallet. He left 320s on the table for a $5 cup of coffee. That's too much, Claire said. Then consider it payment for honesty. He pulled his coat on. Will you be here tomorrow night? I'm here every night. Then maybe I'll see you again. He paused at the door, rain waiting beyond the threshold. Thank you, Claire, for treating me like a person instead of a problem. He left before she could respond, disappearing into the storm. Claire stood in the empty diner, the 20s still on the table, and realized her hands were shaking slightly. She did not know who Julian really was or why he had walked into her life, but something had shifted in the last hour. Something that felt dangerous and necessary at the same time. She locked up and walked home through the rain, and for the first time in 3 years, she thought about painting again. Julian West returned 3 nights later. Claire saw him through the window before he even reached the door, his silhouette cutting through the streetlight glow. Her heart kicked against her ribs in a way that annoyed her. She had spent the past 72 hours telling herself that their conversation had meant nothing, that he was just another customer seeking temporary refuge from whatever storm followed him. But when he walked in, and his eyes found hers immediately, she knew she had been lying to herself. Coffee? She asked, keeping her voice steady. Always. He took the same booth by the window. Tonight he wore jeans and a simple sweater, looking less like someone important and more like someone trying to blend in. It almost worked. The diner had a few more customers tonight. A young couple sharing fries in the corner booth, two college students with laptops and textbooks spread across their table, and a woman reading a paperback novel at the counter. Normal people living normal lives. Claire brought Julian his coffee and a slice of apple pie she had not asked if he wanted. "You look less haunted tonight," she said. "I slept." He cut into the pie. "First real sleep in weeks, actually. I think our conversation helped. Talking to a waitress cured your insomnia?" She raised an eyebrow. "That's either sad or impressive. Maybe both." He took a bite, nodded appreciatively. "This is good. Did you make it?" "The owner does. I just serve it." She glanced back at her other tables, then made a decision. "I'm on break in 10 minutes. If you're still here, we can talk properly." "I'll wait." Those 10 minutes stretched like hours. Claire refilled coffee cups and cleared plates and tried not to look at Julian. Too often, but she felt his presence like gravity. When her break finally came, she poured 2 fresh coffees and slid into the seat across from him. "You came back," she said. It was not a question, but it hung between them anyway. "I wanted to." Julian's honesty was disarming. "That night, talking to you, it reminded me of something I'd forgotten, what it feels like to just exist without performance. Most people call that being bored. Most people are wrong." He studied her face in the diner's fluorescent light. "You have a scar on your jaw. I noticed it the first night but didn't want to stare." Claire's hand moved automatically to touch the raised line of skin. "Car accident? 2 years ago? Some drunk driver ran a red light. I was lucky, the other driver wasn't." "I'm sorry. Everyone says that." She dropped her hand. "But nobody means it the way you just did. Because I know what it's like to carry something you didn't ask for." Julian leaned back. "I have a brother. Had a brother. He died 3 years ago. Overdose. I was supposed to be watching him that night, but I had a meeting. A meeting I thought was more important than family." The confession landed heavy between them. Claire reached across the table without thinking and touched his hand. Just briefly. Just enough to say she heard him. "That's not your fault," she said. "Everyone says that." He echoed her words with a sad smile. "But nobody means it the way you just did." They sat in the moment, 2 people bound by guilt they could not quite shake, finding unexpected understanding in a cheap diner booth. "Is that why you work so hard?" Claire asked. "Building things, making money? Trying to prove you deserve to still be here?" Julian looked at her like she had reached inside his chest and touched something raw. "How did you know?" "Because I stopped painting for the same reason. If I couldn't save him, why should I get to create beautiful things? Why should I get to be happy?" She stirred her coffee. "Guilt makes us punish ourselves in strange ways." "What would you paint if you started again?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't know anymore. I used to paint landscapes, places that felt peaceful. But after the accident, peaceful felt like lying. So paint the truth instead." Julian's intensity made her pulse quicken. "Paint what you really see." "And what do I see?" "That's for you to figure out." He finished his pie. "But I'd like to see your work sometime. The old stuff, if you still have it." Claire hesitated. She had not shown anyone her paintings in 2 years. They were private, remnants of a person she used to be. But something about Julian's request felt different. He was not asking to judge or critique. He was asking to understand. "Maybe," she said, "if you tell me what you really do. You said you built something. What was it?" Julian's jaw tightened. "A social media platform. You've probably heard of it. ConnectSphere. I founded it 7 years ago. Sold it last year for more money than I'll ever need." Claire's eyes widened. She had heard of ConnectSphere. Everyone had. It was one of those apps that had taken over the world, connecting billions of people, making communication instant and endless, and Julian West had built it. "You're that Julian West," she said slowly. "I'm just Julian." His voice carried a plea. "Can I still be just Julian here?" She looked at him, really looked at him, past the wealth and the fame and the weight of what he had created. She saw someone tired and honest and trying desperately to find solid ground. "Yeah," she said finally. "You can be just Julian." His relief was visible, a tension releasing from his shoulders. "Thank you." They talked until her break ended, and then beyond it, Claire stealing moments between customers to return to their booth. Julian told her about the pressure of success, the way money had isolated him, the friends who had turned out to be investors in disguise. Claire told him about her family, her mother who had died when she was young, her father who drank too much and loved too little. They discovered they both liked old movies and hated small talk, that they both felt like strangers in their own lives, that they both woke up at 3 in the morning wondering if this was all there was. When midnight came, Julian stood reluctantly. "Can I come back tomorrow? This is getting to be a habit." "Is that bad?" Claire bit her lip. "I don't know yet. Ask me in a week." "I will." He left his usual generous tip and paused at the door. "Claire, I meant what I said. I'd really like to see your paintings." After he left, Claire stood in the empty diner and made a decision. She went home, pulled the dusty portfolio from under her bed, and spent the rest of the night looking at who she used to be. The next evening, she brought 3 small paintings wrapped in brown paper. When Julian arrived, she placed them on the table between them like an offering. "These are old," she warned. "Before the accident, before I stopped believing in anything beautiful." Julian unwrapped them carefully. The first showed a sunrise over mountains, colors bleeding into each other, like wounds healing. The second was a city street after rain, reflections turning reality into something dreamlike. The third was a woman's face, half in shadow, half in light, her expression caught between sorrow and hope. He studied each one in silence, his fingers tracing the edges without touching the paint. When he finally looked up, his eyes were bright, with something Claire could not name. "You're wrong," he said quietly. "You still believe in beautiful things. You just forgot how to see them in yourself." Claire's throat tightened. "They're just paintings." "No." Julian shook his head. "They're proof that you survived, that you can still create even after being broken. That's not just beautiful, that's miraculous." Something cracked open in Claire's chest, something she had kept locked since the accident, since her world had shattered and reformed into a shape she did not recognize. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Why are you really here, Julian?" she whispered. "You could be anywhere, with anyone. Why a diner? Why me?" He reached across and took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "Because everywhere else, I'm a product, a brand, a mistake or a success, depending on who's talking. But here with you, I'm just a person trying to remember what that means. And you're not looking at me like I'm something to use or fix or worship. You're looking at me like I'm real." "You are real," Claire said. "So are you." His grip tightened. "And that scares me more than anything I've built or lost." The diner hummed around them, fluorescent lights flickering, coffee brewing, the world turning outside while they sat in their small pocket of honesty. They both knew this could not last, that their worlds would eventually collide in ways that would hurt. But for now, in this moment, they held on to each other like shipwreck survivors finding shore. Neither of them knew that tomorrow would bring the storm they had both been running from. But tonight, they had this. And for now, this was enough. The morning everything changed, Claire was sorting through supply invoices in the back room when her coworker Melody burst in holding her phone like it was on fire. "Oh my God, Claire. Your coffee guy. He's all over the news. Claire's stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Melody shoved the phone in her face. The headline screamed across the screen in bold letters. Tech billionaire Julian West faces lawsuit over privacy breach. ConnectSphere accused of selling user data. Below it, a photograph showed Julian leaving a courthouse, his face hard and distant. Nothing like the man who sat in her booth and talked about broken things with gentle honesty. Claire's hands went cold. She read the article with growing dread. A massive lawsuit. Accusations of betraying user trust. Reporters camping outside his apartment. His face plastered across every news site and social media platform he had helped create. That's your midnight regular, right? Melody's eyes were wide with excitement. The guy who tips like crazy? He's worth like $2 billion. Can you believe it? Claire could not breathe properly. 2 weeks. She had known him for 2 weeks, and she had let herself believe that what they had was real. That he was just Julian, a lonely man seeking connection. But he was Julian West, and he had been lying by omission every single night. I need some air, Claire managed, pushing past Melody into the alley behind the diner. She leaned against the brick wall, her mind racing. Had he been using her? Was she just another escape, another distraction from his real life? The paintings she had shown him, the stories she had shared, had any of it mattered to him at all? Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Claire, I know you've seen the news. Please let me explain. I'm outside, Julian. She looked up. There, at the end of the alley, stood Julian. He looked like he had not slept, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion and something that looked like fear. Claire walked toward him slowly, each step feeling heavy. When she stood in front of him, she crossed her arms over her chest like armor. You lied to me, she said. I never lied. His voice was rough. I just didn't tell you everything? That's the same thing. Anger and hurt warred in her chest. You let me think you were just some guy. You let me trust you. I am just some guy. Julian stepped closer. Everything I told you was true. The loneliness, the guilt, the feeling of being trapped, none of that was fake. But you didn't trust me enough to tell me who you really were. What you were really dealing with. Claire's voice cracked. I showed you my paintings. I told you about my accident, about my mother, and you were hiding this whole other life. Because I needed one place where I wasn't that person. Julian's hands flexed at his sides like he wanted to reach for her but did not dare. Do you know what it's like to have every conversation be a calculation? Every person wondering what they can get from you? I came to that diner because it was the only place where nobody knew my name. And then I met you, and for the first time in years, I felt human again. So I was therapy? The words came out bitter. A convenient escape? No. The force of his denial made her flinch. You were the first real thing I'd found in years. The first person who looked at me and saw someone worth knowing instead of something worth using. Claire wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. But she had learned the hard way that wanting something did not make it true. The lawsuit, she said. Is it real? Did you really betray all those people? Julian's face went pale. It's complicated. When we built ConnectSphere, we made compromises. Decisions that seemed necessary at the time. I told myself we were helping people connect. But I ignored the cost. The data collection, the privacy issues, the way the platform was being weaponized to spread hate and lies. He ran a hand through his hair. I knew, and I did nothing because stopping would have meant losing everything I'd built. So you chose money over people. I chose fear over courage. Julian's voice broke. And now I'm paying for it. But Claire, that night I walked into your diner, I had just filed papers to shut down ConnectSphere completely. I'm liquidating everything, using my wealth to compensate the people who were harmed. That's what the lawsuit is really about. My former partners want to stop me from destroying what we built. Claire stared at him. You're shutting down a $2 billion company? It should never have existed in the first place. Not the way we ran it. His eyes held hers. You asked me once what I was running from. This is it. I was running from the person I'd become. The person who put profit over principle. And then I met you. And you reminded me that I used to believe in creating beautiful things. Things that mattered. A car honked somewhere on the street behind them. The city moved on, indifferent to their small crisis. Why didn't you tell me? Claire asked quietly. Any of this? Because I was afraid. Julian's confession was raw. Afraid you'd look at me the way everyone else does. Like I'm a problem to solve or a villain to condemn. I wanted just a few more nights of being Julian, of being someone you might actually care about. I did care about you. The past tense hung between them, but I don't know if the person I cared about was real. He was. Julian took a careful step closer. He is. The man who sat in your booth and talked about his brother, who looked at your paintings like they were treasures, who fell in love with a waitress who saw through all his walls. That man is more real than anything else in my life. Claire's breath caught. You don't love me. You barely know me. I know you hide your scar but refuse to let it define you. I know you quit painting because you thought you didn't deserve beauty anymore. I know you work nights because silence feels safer than crowds. I know you're scared of being hurt, but you're brave enough to keep hoping anyway. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. And I know that when you smile, really smile, it feels like watching the sun rise after a very long night. Tears slipped down Claire's cheeks before she could stop them. This is insane. You're a billionaire dealing with lawsuits, and I'm a waitress who can barely pay rent. Your life is chaos and mine is invisible. How would this ever work? I don't know. Julian finally closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to frame her face with infinite gentleness. But I know I don't want to go back to a life where everything is a transaction, where nothing is real. You make me want to be better, to actually fix what I broke instead of just running from it. I can't fix you, Claire whispered. I don't need you to fix me. His thumb brushed away her tears. I need you to believe I can fix myself. And maybe, if you're willing, I need you beside me while I try. Claire closed her eyes. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea, that their worlds were too different, that the complications would drown them both. But her heart, the part of her that had started painting again after 2 years of silence, the part that had felt alive again in those midnight conversations, that part was louder. If I say yes, she opened her eyes. If I try this with you, I need the truth, all of it. No more hiding. I promise. Julian's relief was palpable. No more hiding. And you have to keep shutting down Connect Sphere? Even if it costs you everything. Because if you go back on that, we're done. I won't go back on it. That company nearly destroyed who I am. I'm not letting it take anything else from me. He leaned his forehead against hers. Especially not you. Claire let herself lean into him. Let herself feel the warmth of someone who saw her completely and stayed anyway. I'm terrified, she admitted. Me too. Julian pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe and alone. She kissed him then, soft and tentative, a beginning instead of an ending. When they broke apart, the world had not changed. The lawsuit still waited. The reporters still circled. Their lives were still impossibly complicated, but they were facing it together now. Two broken people who had found each other in the darkness and decided that maybe, just maybe, they could build something beautiful from the ruins. 3 months later, Claire opened her first art show in a small gallery downtown. The paintings covered the walls, raw and honest, showing pain and healing in equal measure. Julian stood beside her, no longer running, no longer hiding. They had given their first interview together the week before, talking about accountability and redemption and the courage it takes to tear down what you built when you realize it's harming people. The world still watched them, still judged, still questioned whether a billionaire and a waitress could possibly make sense together. But in the quiet moments when Julian watched Claire paint and she saw him smile like he had found his way home, they knew the truth. Love was not about matching worlds. It was about two people brave enough to create a new one together, and that was exactly what they were doing. The end.